Okay, so I wanted to take a couple opportunities here to talk a little bit about the thinking behind our homework, okay? Because once again, you're in the driver's seat. I'm not giving you anything. I'm just giving you guys some reference photographs to start building a cannon. Now, the entirety of the surface should be a subdivision surface object. We want to start stripping out the inclusion of these faceted edges in our final finished polygonal results, right? However, we need to be kind of aware of our own sequence before we start. I'm a big believer that 3D modelers think like chess players. We need to think 8 or 9 steps ahead. 9 times out of 10, what I see folks doing over in the lab is they just jump right in, they start throwing down some polygons without even really considering their own personal sequence. I think we should always take an opportunity to slow down, look at what we're trying to create before we jump in and place some models or some polygons down for our models. So here's the reference photographs that we're going to be using for this week's homework assignment. There are 3 of them. I'm going to ask you guys to continue to flex your muscle, okay? Establish the muscle memory of importing all 3 of these images in, aligning them to each other. It's identical in sequence and in process to what we did on the train, but now we have a 3rd one into the mix. It's identical. It really is, okay? But if we look at what we have here, the reference images are going to provide a tremendous amount of detail, but they're also going to also produce for us maybe a sequence that we should follow. The first question that I ask myself whenever I'm starting to model is this a symmetrical object? So I present the question to you. Is this a symmetrical object? Yeah, absolutely. This is totally a symmetrical object, right? The left side is identical to the right side, right? So that's a really good starting point for us. It's not about working hard, it's about working smart, okay? Most of the frame could be modeled, we can only model half of most of the frame. And we can mirror that across the x-axis, boom, we're on our way, okay? In addition, kind of sculpturally, I start looking at planes in here as well. From the side here, check this out, the frame of the cannon that kind of holds the cannon, okay? It looks like it's, kind of a planar piece, left, right, up and down, 90-degree angles. But if we look at the frame from the top, it's actually offset. It cradles the cannon in the frame a little bit differently than I thought. That's something we should note. Okay, that's an important feature of this. It's different than what the standard convention kind of communicates. We see that angle again up here in the front. So this detail in here is something that I need to be mindful of as I'm starting to flesh this out. In addition, the wheels, okay? This is going to be something fun to play around with. There's an axle here that's kind of hard to see in some of the pictures. I forget who I was talking with her before class started today, but it's our job to fill in the blanks. So if the reference image produces some problems for you, a question, it's our job to figure out those questions, okay? There is a certain amount of creativity that we can infuse inside of our model. So if you're stumped, use the reference and the research as a guide, as a starting point, but you're more than encouraged to put your own fingerprint on these, okay? To fill in the blanks where you think is appropriate and necessary to create something that's pretty fun and pretty awesome and pretty cool, okay? The starting point, how are we going to begin? Oftentimes, I like to place myself in the shoes or the perspective of the craftsperson that would have naturally been responsible for creating this thing, right? Now, if, for example, the little frame of the cannon here, if you look at the side, and you can see it down over here as well, how would you create this piece out of wood in the 18th century?
Start with a big square and just cut out the other parts.
I like it, absolutely. That's a big piece of wood, though, right? It's got a huge piece of, wood, really tall. Is it going to be one piece, probably? Probably multiple pieces. That's an excellent place for us to start, too. It's not just one piece that we're trying to very intricately cut into this pattern. What if it's 2 or 3 pieces of 2 or 3 rectangles stacked on top of each other? And then each of those rectangles has a very simple, kind of collection of sliced pieces versus a very complex collection of sliced pieces. Let me show you specifically what I'm talking about. Let's jump back over here in Maya and start plotting through what potentially all of this could look like. Now, I've gone through the problem. No problem. Thank you for letting me know. I've already gone through the the process of putting all of my reference in. I've kind of hidden them in the perspective view, but there's the top, okay? Here's the right view, and of course the front view, all kind of dialed and ready to go. I want to hang out in the right view, and let's spend some time looking at how we could potentially construct the frame of this. Paint in broad brushstrokes, okay? Think generally. We're not trying to create, this has some really intricate, pieces in here. That would be difficult to manage, okay? However, if we just start with simple beginnings, okay? This is where I get to have a whole lot of fun and be creative, okay? So I got to ask myself some questions now. I'm going to turn on my X-ray so I can see through the mesh. Now, how big do I want that top board to be? Now, it kind of makes sense that maybe that's the width, the height of one of the boards. Maybe this is 2 or 3 boards stacked on top of each other, so we're in the driver's seat as to those decisions, okay? There's kind of the bottom of it. And there's kind of the top of it, okay? I like it. Before I go any further here, in the front view, that's clearly not the thickness that I'm after. And luckily for me, the reference is going to tell me quite wonderfully how big all this stuff is. Now, small little details like this, I don't want to raise it up, raise the polygons up. I need to lower my, my reference somewhere right around in there. Let's see if that still works from the right view. Yep, I'm pretty pleased with that. That's a good starting point. All right, so now I can start jumping in and making the rest of this, okay? So I'm going to duplicate this object since it's already got the basic parts and pieces that I'm after here. And now I got to ask the big hard question as to where do I want this next board to go? Maybe something like that. That might be kind of fun. Somewhere right around in there. All right, now there's a small little angle that comes up from the front, so inverts, I'm going to grab those points, just move them back a little bit, and I think I goofed it a little bit as well. Let's get it back in here, something like that. That's pretty great. Let's look at my model in perspective and see how it's all working together. Okay. Now, the cool thing about having these multiple pieces in here is that we're getting some really great stuff for free. Okay. It's beginning to have these small little gaps in there. It's going to provide us with an excellent, excellent opportunity to make this look like a whole series of interconnected boards rather than just one gigantic piece of 3D modeling, right? Now, I've kind of missed my mark here a little bit. It's a little too high, so I want to just bring it down ever so slightly. Somewhere right around there. I'm good with that. Let's look at it again from the right and continue our work here. Now, I got some slicing in here that I need to do, okay? I'm a big fan of getting these slices in pretty early and establishing the basic overall shape. So, apologize. This is where Multicut comes in, and I think I'm just going to hold down the Shift key or left click and drag. There's one. Do it again. Left click and drag. I kind of missed it, but that's okay. I'll try again. That's good enough for me. And now I have the beginnings of what I'm after, and I'm going to multi-cut right in there. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just slowly stair-stepping and trying to remove the polygons that I'm after to get the shape that I need.
And you do canvas-based selection, right?
Say again?
Whatever the quick and drag, you could have done that to select all of them, right?
That's another way of doing it, for sure. There's 1,000 ways to skin this cat, for sure. Command backspace. Now, how am I going to close those openings there?
Bridge.
Bridge. Yeah, you got it. You got it. Just going to run bridge. Now, I'm going to, I apologize. Let me just hide this one. I want to make sure. Yeah, I forgot to delete one down there. There we go. So I'm just going to run bridge, Q key, bridge, Q key, bridge once more, Q key, and I'm on my way. Let's unhide that other piece. Let's see how it's beginning to take shape. And yeah, this is starting to look pretty good. On this piece down over here, it's driving me crazy that those don't match. Okay. Something very close. There is vert snapping in here that you can do. I mean, there's a lot that you could do. I'm going to let you do that. Okay. Humanity is not perfect. Okay. This is clearly an object that was made many, many, many hundreds of years ago before they had CNC machines, automated manufacturing capabilities. What's to say that it's a little off?
Oh, can you show me how you would do like the arch?
Yeah.
On the bottom? 'Cause
That's coming up very, very shortly. Okay. Point being, as we start to go through this, think like the artisan or the craftsperson that would be physically responsible for making it, right? It all starts with very simple dimensions, very simple boards, very simple hunks of metal, and they bend and they rotate these and they start to manipulate oftentimes flat objects to get it into really unique shapes. Okay. Now the question was, how are we going to create this little arc down here at the bottom? It's a good question. It's a good question. Ideas on how we could create that arc.
I mean, the most brute force way of doing it would be just to put a bunch, just cut on the bottom with a bunch of multi-cutter.
Yeah.
Do a bunch of those and then individually move those and
Yep.
try and smooth it out that way. But
Yep.
that's a pure brute force method.
And that's not a bad method. That's a really great way of doing it. Yeah.
You could do that, but you could just do like 3 cuts and then just raise the middle one.
I like it. That's a good way of doing it too. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. What's another way?
Say do add divisions and then modify it.
I like it. That's another great way of doing it for sure. Point being, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. There's not one right way, but we do want to try to create the shape as cleanly as we can. I think for me, whenever I'm trying to define an arc, I like to first set the boundaries of that arc. So I'm just going to use multi-cut. That's where the arc starts. That's where it stops on the other side. Okay. I want to have mine kind of be a really consistent arc itself. So I need to figure out the middle line of that arc in there. And maybe I have 5 edges, including the start and stop, here in the interior of the arc that will allow me to deform and move those verts up at the bottom. Okay. Multi-cut does a really bad job. You know, I mean, I could just kind of space it out manually by hand, but I'm going to mess it up every single time, right? So there's a couple other ways that we can go in and do this to get a little bit more of a consistent, evenly distributed number of edge loops running along that part of the mesh itself. And this is where our mesh tools come in, and specifically the insert edge loop tool. Now I'm going to go into the tool options. Okay, here we go. All right. Oops. All right. So insert edge loop allows me to go in and just automatically place edges or edge loops wherever I want. It's a great, great tool. But if we look at some of the tool options here, we have multiple edge loops. I want maybe, let's do 3. Okay. Equal distance from edge. That's interesting. Okay. Oh, that's not doing what I wanted to do. Sorry. Multiple edge loops. Use equal there it is. Sorry. It's use equal multiplier. That's what I was trying to, and that's going to evenly distribute those 3 new edge loops inside the selected row. And now I have, you know, kind of a starting point of where I want. I think I want to have 5 instead of 3. There it is. Voila. Wonderful. Okay. Okay. I certainly could go in and brute force it. Just selecting those verts down there at the bottom and moving them up to reference. This is not a bad way of modeling. Okay? That's perfectly acceptable. That would work just as well. Okay? Here's another way of doing it. And we've talked about this before in the past, but we have a great soft selection system as well. And the soft selection system allows us to very directly, finely change kind of the influence of a tool over many selected components at the exact same time. So check this out. Instead of just grabbing a 1 vert here, I'm going to grab all the verts. And you know, I'm selecting through right now, so really what I'm grabbing are both the front and the back verts at the exact same time. And now I'm going to enable soft selection. Soft selection is available to be activated in a couple different spots. It's over here in our modeling toolkit very directly, soft selection, okay? Just turn it on, turn it off. The keyboard shortcut for that is B, B as in boy, okay? And on the surface, you're probably going, whoa, what's the dealio? Things are now yellow and orange, or maybe you don't even see a strange color. What we are creating here is an area of influence, okay? A gradient, if you will. At the boundaries of that gradient, the selected verts are going to accept 0% of whatever tool that we're using, and the verts at the center of the gradient are going to get 100% of whatever tool we're using. Okay, so I'm going to use the move tool, but I need to change the size of the area that I want to influence. This is where we hold the B key and left click and drag. Come on now. Might help if I use a different series of shortcuts. All right, I'm going to go into my move tool, and then let's go into soft selection. There we go. Select some verts. Fall off radius, that's what I was trying to adjust. My radius might be so small. Yeah, my radius was so small that the B key, I wasn't doing the B key enough. Okay. Now what I'm trying to visualize here is the boundary. See how I'm changing as I change the fall off radius? That circle there, that circle is so critical for us because it tells us the boundary of our radius. So where the edges of the circle reside, that's 0% influence. Okay, at the center of the circle, it's 100% influence. So now, the boundary's a little off. Let's make it smaller. See how I'm slightly moving those? Make it smaller even still. Now we're getting there. Come on now.
Is it because you have all the verts selected
You know, you could just go and grab that one.
and then soft select it?
Let's change that boundary down.
Because it looks like you're just grabbing all four of them and it's not messing with it at all. So.
There we go. I think that was, in fact, my problem. Thank you, Mr. Olson. There we go. Now we're smoothly attenuating it. I'm going to hit undo. I want to make my boundary a little bit bigger. There we go. Yeah, but it's also moving those up there, which is really why I was trying to only work with those verts. Yeah, it's moving everything. It's not what I want.
Is it possible when you're pressing the B key to like make it more vertices instead of just a circle?
Yeah, so in that case, you want to start working with the fall off curve. Okay. Yeah, that's not giving me exactly what I want.
Because it looks like all your selection bases it at 0. So if you have 4 verts selected, then all 4
You know
verts
what?
go at 0.
Here. Let's go back in time a couple seconds. Turn off soft selection. And I'm just going to brute force it.
Fair enough.
Sometimes, now, if you really wanted to make it a really even curve, you know, this is the center line, that one goes there. Then you can move the pairs simultaneously just to make sure you're getting a pretty consistent reproduction of the curve, and that's good enough for me. I'm happy with that. Sometimes I try to over-engineer things. I try to put too much technology into play when it's just really the simple solution's the correct one. Okay? Yeah, and that's what I'm after. Yeah, if we want to have a curve in the mesh, we got to define the start and stop of that curve with edges. Okay, and edges are these edge loops are responsible for fundamentally creating that little radius down there at the bottom, that little inset. Okay. Now with something like this, okay, let's get out of X-ray. How are we going to change it into a subdivision surface, right? If I was just hit the 3 key, whoa, that's no bueno. Okay. However, we need to add some additional edge loops. I want this to be a subdivision surface. I want to have nice little radiuses around the corners. It's an excellent practice for us to get in. Let's do the low-hanging fruit first, okay? Methodically go through it. On a square versus a cylinder, there's really 3 loops that we need to work with. There's this angle, okay? There's that loop that goes around horizontally. excuse me for a second as I hide this piece. So there's this loop, and then there is this loop, okay? And then there's finally that loop. So we had to slice within all 3 axes on cubes to make sure we're getting the correct combination of edges for sub Ds, okay? So let's do the low-hanging fruit first, okay? Now over here at the top, I want a nice little cap in there. So let's put good old multi-cut to work. So I'm slicing that way. On the interior here, I slice there, there. Let's hit the 3 key now. Aha! Oops, I hit 2, sorry. There's 3. We're getting there, right? Starting to look a little bit better, but we have some work that we need to do still. Let's go back to the mesh, the 1 key to unsubdivide. And it's really the interior ones that cause the most headaches. It's these. That one down there. And of course, I'll need another one right there. And I got to do one more on that side. And voila, let's hit the 3 key. And I got a good looking piece. With these small little radiuses in here, check it out. Let's put the other board back in.
Oh, and those small radiuses allow you to like almost put them almost inside of each other. You'll still get the look of.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? Now it looks like there's a little seam going down between that piece and that piece. Once I do the exact same treatment on this top board, it really is going to feel like a couple different boards stacked on top of each other. Those little radiuses on the boundaries of our boards create little, kind of little indentions, like little grooves for little dirt and shadows to hide in. And it's going to make your object feel a lot more real, a lot more real. One of the things that it has done, unfortunately, is it's kind of ruined, my curve down there at the bottom, right?
I would submit that it makes it look nicer.
Yeah, I want to make it look better, in my opinion, okay? So let's turn off our X-ray. I want to shore up this transition. I don't want the algorithm to start smoothing until it gets right here. So I want to add a couple more edge loops into the mix. So maybe one right there, one right there. So now we're turning off the algorithm basically at this juncture. Do the same thing on the back side, right there and right there, okay? Q key to go back to my selection tool. Let's hit the 3 key to subdivide it. And that looks a little bit more crisp, a little bit more clean. See how that corner now is no longer scooping up as it begins to go into the arc. It looks as though it's perfectly flat on the bottom. It hits the start of that little curve, and then it goes up. And the sub-D algorithm is smoothing out that curve exactly the way I would like it to. Looking good. Looking good.
Would you say put in the edge loops for the subdivision before or after we've done all of our component editing?
After, yeah, do it after. That's a really good question. So the question really was, when do we put in all these extra edge loops? When you're done, okay? The mesh and the model should stand on its own without these extra loops on it. We shouldn't be relying upon the sub-D engine to create the shape. Our job as modelers is to create the shape. The purpose of the sub-D algorithm is to smooth the shape. It's just to kind of put it under tension and smooth it all out, okay? So make the model as you traditionally would, hit the 3 key and go, where do I need to add edges to get the final finished polished result that I'm looking for, okay?
So for that,
Yeah.
use the Multicut tool, and you had camera-based switched off. Did it go to the other side as well?
It did, yeah. Yeah, Multicut is going to kind of ignore camera-based selection. It's going to look at the geometry and the loops within inside those shapes.
Even when it's automatically just like making that line. When you're like.
Yeah, you got it. Now, on that note, let me take a step back and let's explore this for a second. If I had just these in here selected and I ran Multicut, yeah, it's still going to go through. Yep. Because if I just did that, see how it only slices on the interior of what's selected, but the Multicut, the control key with Multicut is just going to ignore the selection and slice the loop no matter what. Yeah.
Is there a way to like snap your multicut tool into making
Kinda, yeah. So if we go back into Multicut, I'm gonna do this in an orthographic view. You can, outside, if you start your slice below your mesh and go up, holding the shift key, see how it's snapping to 15-degree increments? That's a way you can slice perfectly vertically or an angle, Here's my recommendation to you, and this is something that's kind of hidden. I got the Multicut tool on, and then down at the bottom of your modeling toolkit, keyboard and mouse shortcuts, okay? I really can't recommend you going through this because the Multicut tool is pretty intense, okay? Yeah, there's a lot of commands, and this is really kind of an Autodesk convention where they have one tool, and then you have to have like 8 fingers and toes on your keyboard to hold the right, key combos to get what you wanted. But point being, there's a lot of power in Multicut. Just be aware of all of these different modifier keys that will change the Multicut tool.
So the centered edge loop is just going to center it between the last two
Yeah,
sides?
you got it.
All right.
Yeah, control middle mouse button. Yeah, that's a good one. So control, now I'm doing middle mouse button. See how it's like perfectly locked in the center?
And then you left click the...
Nope, I'm middle mouse
Just-
button.
you
I'm
just release it.
releasing it, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it's at the bottom. It's the bottom of whatever tool's on, right? So here's Multicut.
Think of the last place you would check, it's right there.
Yeah. It's off my screen. It's right there. However, ignore backspaces. Let's see if that changes how Multicut works. Nah, still does it. That may actually just be for the regular interior slicing. Yep. One other thing, and I was talking with Sarah about this during lab. I really can't recommend enough working unsubdivided. You're going to understand the mesh, you're going to understand what you're creating, and you're going to understand your sequence much clearer. Okay? I only hit that 3 key to preview my subdivision to see like how it's going, right? I never leave it on while I'm modeling because, under the tension of the algorithm, the wireframe is just going to get kind of squirrely and it's going to be confusing. Okay, so just turn it off, do your modeling, go from there. Okay. Okay. Now, a couple other things. We talked about this last week with Duplicate Special, right? And Duplicate Special is pretty rad. We're going to have some opportunities here, once again, to do some great radially, duplicated geometry, okay? You see all these little bolts? That's a Duplicate Special, right? So if we wanted, as an example, let's just make a bolt real fast. Pretend that that's where I want it to be. I don't have a wheel there at the moment, but that's okay. All right. So how am I going to duplicate this object in a circle?
Is there not a radial duplicate button?
There's not.
No.
It's Duplicate Special, right? Duplicate Special is responsible for us duplicating things in straight lines, but it's also responsible for us duplicating things in a circle. Now, when we're duplicating things in a circle, we have to be very mindful of the pivot point. Okay, this little gold square, that's the pivot point. Because the pivot point with the radial duplication is going to be, it should be the center of the circle that we're trying to duplicate around. All right, so check it out. I want to duplicate these bolts around the center of that wheel right there. Does anyone remember how to get into the edit duplicate or edit pivot point mode?
Z?
It's not the Z key. Say again? D as in dog. You're right. Yep, the D key, or D as in delta. Okay, and now we can place that pivot point wherever we want. And I'm going to place it right about in there. That's a good start for me. I'll hit the D key again to exit the edit pivot point mode. Okay. And now I'm free to do my duplication. So edit, duplicate special. I'm going to go into the tool properties here. This little popover is intimidating. It's going to take a little bit of experimentation to figure out the correct kind of formula here. But let's see. I'm going to do what, 5 of these? Yeah, there's 6 in total. So that means I have to have what, and duplicate, or you know what we can do? We'll do 6 total, and then I got to figure out what axis. I want to duplicate this along the x-axis. So every copy is going to be duplicated 60 degrees along the x-axis. There we go. And then I'm just going to go back in and delete the first one. Just going to make the math easy for me. Yep. There they all are. So it has everything to do with that pivot point. Okay? The pivot point is going to determine the center of the circle that we're going to duplicate around. Okay? It's a great, quick way of running in and adding some detail. Okay? There's a lot of that detail to add on here. Now, I would probably start to combine all of these things down and delete my his. No, not group. Not group. There's a difference between group and combine, right? And let's talk about that difference. Okay, Control G. If you're rigging something, Control G and grouping things is a good place to go. But when it comes to modeling, we want to get this down to like a couple different mesh objects. We don't want to have 1,000 mesh objects in our scene. Okay, we start dividing things out into mesh objects when we need to start rotating and animating those mesh objects individually from each other. But if it's all one piece like a cannon, it should all be in one mesh object at the end of the day, right? So when you group things, this is what you do, okay? Or this is what happens. Same thing, edit, and then group, okay? When you group something, it puts it under a new object inside of our outliner, and then we have access to all the members of that group. All these are called, this is the parent, these are the children, and I can freely go in and continue to work with this in object mode, you know. Or I can grab the group and move them all together. Okay. What I would recommend is a combine. Okay. All right. So combining it, this is going to put all the geometry on one mesh object. Okay. Let's look at our outliner. Watch it over here as I hit combine. Bloop. Here's the new mesh object. These are references back to the original mesh objects of all the individual pieces. We don't need these anymore, okay? So on the new mesh object, we want to delete the history, and then watch what happens to all those references. They go away, okay? Whenever I do a combine, the first step after is delete the history to get rid of all that referenced information inside the system. These are the types of things that are going to bog down Maya and just kind of like dump the performance, okay? If you find Maya getting really unstable or really kind of laggy, there's probably a lot of object history and a lot of referencing going on inside your scene, and so much that the back-end database is like, I don't even know what to do right now, so I'm just going to crash, right? I can't manage all of this information, so I'm just going to crash, right? So delete your history. Combine. Huh?
I'm so glad Maya doesn't have a union.
What do you mean?
We get sued for overworking it way too often.
Oh, right. Yeah. So combine. I'm going to combine these again. Delete the history. At the end of the day, this is kind of what I'm going for, right? I got one mesh object over here. Okay. That's got all my geometry in it. Okay. We can have what are called discontiguous polygons within one piece. These are all separate pieces. They're independent of each other, but they all exist on one mesh object at the end of the day. This is allowed. This is legit. It's totally part of our workflow. We want to have as few objects inside of our outliner as possible, because then it just turns into an organizational nightmare to manage, right? Questions on what we're going to be doing for our homework this week? Everyone excited about it?
Yeah, sure. Woo!
So subdivision surfaces, right? Should be a fun one. Now, in addition to making the... Yeah, the challenge is different, right? It's not as much detail, But now the subdivision surfaces require some attention, right? But remember the practice. Remember the simple idea that we're just trying to go in and add some new edges in some very specific spots to shore up the model and to kind of reduce the influence of the algorithm just just in those areas. Okay? That's the big picture idea. Edge sandwiches. The original edge is in the middle, the new one above, new one below. We're on our way. Okay? In addition to making the model itself, also spend some time, make a simple little scene. And I mean a simple little scene. I think if you take a look around at the renders from your medicine bottle lab assignment, I think you can see quite wonderfully the benefit of having the scene in there. It gives the object context. It provides some scale. It helps the audience and you understand what it is that you're looking at and its relationships, its spatial relationships inside the rest of the picture. It's pretty cool. Questions, comments? All right, good luck. I'll see you guys next week.